This webinar is going to be focused a lot on cold calling. One of the things and one of the questions we get a lot from our users is, I know that calling should be a big part of my recruiting process, but I hate cold calling. It is very difficult. People don't like it. People don't like to receive cold calls generally. And so what I think ends up happening is you get a lot of just generic kind of email outreach. You get a lot of pretty generic text outreach, and kind of not enough calling. And when calling does happen, it's kind of, I think a lot of people either don't like it or they will maybe give up easily. They'll call somebody. If they're not interested, they'll kind of be no problem, hang up the phone, which is totally fine. But wanted to basically use this time to hear from a couple experts on cold calling. So I'll let Ashley and Jason introduce themselves, but both of them are very, very good at what they do. And cold calling is a big part of what they've done in their careers and what kind of they've built teams around. So yeah, without further ado, wanted to maybe Ashley, if you want to go first.
Oh, sure. Love to. I am Ashley Gawley. I'm VP of Strategic Growth for Briggs Freeman Sotheby's International Realty, but I'm also a dual role executive. So I also am VP of Strategic Growth for Peerage, who's like the parent company that owns many Sotheby's and Century 21s across the United States and Canada. I do probably what a lot of you guys do every day, cold call people. I work on mergers, acquisitions, and recruiting agents and teams, and have done it for many, many years now and consider myself to be pretty good at it.
Excellent.
Oh, over to Jason.
Thanks, Ashley. Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. My name is Jason Casper. I'm the Director of Sales here at Corded. I've been cold calling my whole life. I come from a family of auctioneers. I've been in the prop tech space for a while, and now I work with over 1,000 brokerages throughout the country, all to perfect the craft, which is recruiting and retention. I love cold calling. I've, in essence, built out a career and scaled many teams, all based off of the confidence to pick up the phone and do it again and again and again and again. So when Chris and I were putting together, hey, what kind of webinar should we have and how could it be relevant to our customers? I could talk about cold calling all day, and as a result, we landed here. So thanks everyone for joining. Ashley, thanks for the time. And we're excited to jump into the discussion. Just at a very high level, we're going to be covering a couple of things. The first is building out a routine and workflow so you could be confident, comfortable, and in a position of power to, of course, win on cold calls. Secondly, is a bit more tactical. How do you start the cold call? What do you say? How do you get involved with someone in a positive light? We'll then dive into what we call pivot points in the conversation, whether it be navigating through responses or objections or making it personalized. And then lastly, jumping into how do you close out that call? You've had a great conversation. You want to make sure there's next steps on the calendar. And of course, it continues to push the ball forward. So that's high level what we're going to be talking about here over the next 53 or so minutes. And with that, Chris, I'll kick it back over to you for the jumping point here.
Yeah, happy to jump right in. Before I do, Ashley, just so everybody knows, how long have you been using Corded?
2 years now. I think we actually are coming up on our 2-year anniversary date of using Corded, and it is a tool that I cannot do my day-to-day job without.
Yeah, Ashley is one of our earliest and one of our most successful and most powerful users. Cool. So yeah, let's jump right in. I think one of the things that we wanted to get right into was just how do you decide who to call? So you have lots of different people that you can find in Corded, and even if you don't use Corded, there are just a lot of people at your disposal to call. So very high level, how do you decide who you want to call and how do you make a call list?
Are we going to me first or Jason? Me?
Yeah, why don't we go to
Great.
you first?
Okay, perfect. So I do that a couple of ways, but I think the first and most important thing is to look for my connections. There are, I want to say, like 100,000 agents within like the DFW Metroplex. That's probably an exaggeration, but you get where I'm going with this. That I could pick up the phone and call. But what I first want to do is I'm open corded immediately from the get-go. And I'm looking for connections with our current agents or relationships that I might have now that I can grow deeper, that I can utilize to get my foot in the door. So I'm looking, number one, at connections, relationships. I'm looking at who has maybe worked a recent transaction with one of my agents. And that's like the most high level number one thing I'm looking for before I even look at anything else. We can talk step down about where we're going from there, but I'm number one looking for what kind of personal connection can I have with somebody that I'm going to be cold calling.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, Jason, I know kind of slightly different world, obviously, but how do you decide and how does your team decide who to cold call?
Yeah, it's certainly along the same lines. I think to bring it in essence a layer deeper, it's amongst those groups that are with or individuals that are, say, within our sphere of influence. Where have we won before? So many of our clients, we see that they've had success recruiting from specific areas or brands or at specific, say, average sale prices, right? And in building out ways to be creative, but in essence, tell a similar story that hits upon the same value with folks that you know, or maybe you're one step away from, that's a really easy way to build out a list that I find is not all too intimidating, where you're not looking at 500 or 5,000 agents, but in fact, you're looking at maybe a list of 30. And the goal is, how can I have successful conversations with all of them, say before lunch? That way, with time blocking, it allows for me to understand what's my value prop, what's my story, and then by the seventh, eighth, even ninth call, know what's been working earlier in the day and iterate to ensure that you're as successful as possible.
Yeah, so that makes sense. I think what I like about what both of you said is connections can come in a lot of different forms.
Mhm.
So if you are a brokerage leader, you probably have worked directly with a number of agents, perhaps hundreds of agents in your market over the years. So that is obviously kind of a ready-made list of connections. But even if you're not somebody who's worked in your market for a long time, or if you are a recruiter who, really doesn't know the agents that are in your market, I think you can find connections with just the brokerage at large. And I think you all kind of are intrinsically connected with the agents that are in your market just based on the fact that you're in the same market. So kind of regardless of, what that connection looks like, just being mindful of wanting to have a connection and wanting to have, be able to come from like a warm introduction standpoint in as many cases as possible. Okay, so now I think kind of one of the big ones, which is one of the big questions that we get asked on cold calls all the time, which is once you decide to call people, once you have a list or decide to call a single person, what do you say? What is like the structure and start like putting together the script for a cold call? And yeah, Ashley, we can start with you again.
Okay, so I love this question. I think picking up the phone and like getting a voice on the other line is the hardest thing to do. It's like going to work out. The hardest part is getting to the parking lot, right? But like once you're there, I have a pretty I have a script that I generally follow on most of my cold calls that works really, really well for me. And I would say that I use it probably on like 80% of every call I make because I'm constantly trying to utilize relationships of like people that I know. So what I do is like I figure out who my connecting point is with these agents. And again, in real estate, it's a very small world. So you can probably find a connection to whoever it is that you're calling. And so what I do is I will pick up the phone and I will call this agent. And when they answer the phone, the first thing I say to them is like, "Hey, I'm Ashley. I'm with Briggs Freeman. You're probably not expecting this call, but I bumped into Susan Smith this morning in the office, and she talked to me about how wonderful you are and how incredibly kind you were to work with." And what I have found is like when you tell somebody that you've heard that like they're a kind person, they instantly kind of feel like, oh my gosh, somebody thinks that I'm kind. Like I definitely need to prove them right and be kind to this person that's cold calling me on the phone. So it kind of like drops their defenses a little bit. And I've figured out that people are way more like engaged and having like willing to have a conversation with you if you like call them out for being kind from the very beginning, whether you know they are or not. So that's kind of where I go with it. If I don't know this person at all, what I do is like a pretty quick introduction, and then I try to like get into a warm conversation really quickly because when they figure out it's a cold call, they're going to instantly be like, "I don't have time. Can you please call me back later?" or "Don't call me back at all." But the number one thing I do is use a connection and tell them I've heard that they're a really kind person and would they like be interested in having a conversation, and it works really, really well. Like I would say I have almost like a 90% success rate in getting a meeting when I use that talk track.
And Ashley, that's pretty interesting, right? So oftentimes in a cold call, it's all about how the person on the other end of the phone is trying to prove you wrong. But Your goal is
Yeah.
to ensure that they prove you right.
Yeah.
Outside of kindness, are there any other, things that you use that allow for them to, in essence, drop their guard and prove that, in fact, you know what, I should take this call, and I want to, in essence, prove them right? I'm curious
Yeah.
about, that tactic.
Yeah. So the other thing that I do is I try to be like pretty aware of what they've been doing from a transaction standpoint. And where Corded comes in handy is Corded tells me all of their transaction history. So it also alerts me if they've like recently transacted for the first time in a certain zip code or like price point. And I find that to be a really like engaging point of conversation where I'll bring that up and say, hey, I realize that, or I see that you just closed your first transaction in Highland Park. That's a really difficult market to break into. Like, I'd love to hear how you came across that client. And you're congratulating them on something, you're like telling them job well done. And so usually they're like more interested in having a conversation because people love to talk about what they're doing well.
Yeah, yeah, and we're getting a couple of questions here in the chat.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're
Yeah.
going to go to that, Chris. But we have a couple of questions about, checking with your agent first about, their experience with that co-broke. Do you do that every time? And, for
So
example, if
I
they say it's a great person or a bad person, like how do you navigate those waters?
Good question. I try to do it most times. And we have our agents trained pretty well that if they see a message come through from myself or someone on my team asking for like a reference, that they will reply back pretty quickly. So I try to do that every time. A lot of times, though, it's an agent that I probably have like a vague awareness of. And I will still go ahead and make that call, whether I've heard from the agent or not. At the end of the day, whoever you're calling is probably not going to check in on you and like double verify that this person did indeed say these nice things about them. So like I find that it's okay and it works out pretty well. So to sum it up, I do try to get information on the agent ahead of time from our own agents, but it doesn't always work out. And so I can't stop my day or stop my calling to wait for that information. So I pretty much continue on. Now, as we get further down the line, and we get more like further into our meetings, then I will definitely go and ask for detailed information on the potential prospect.
Definitely. And one thing that I've found to also be successful, taking the perspective of, say, where you sit, Ashley, is within Corded using that pipeline alerts, where if you're able to know if an agent just had the highest closed sale of their career, or even the first listing in a new zip code, or even the first closing at their brokerage, right? If you're able
Mm-hmm.
to have that conversation in a positive light with an agent before their supervisor or broker is even aware of that milestone, it puts you in a position of not only a place of kindness, but also a way to say, hey, if you were a part of our family, just think about how great we would treat you, even
Yeah.
if you're not today, right?
Yeah.
And to that point, I guess a question, right? So we have the dropping of the guard in regards to being kind, but once you get into the conversation, is there anything specific that you say to an agent who maybe just had the best year ever, or on the flip side of that might be struggling a bit? And how does that change the conversation?
Yeah. So before I answer that question, I want to go back really quick and give you a real life example of how that works because you said like a lot of times an agent's brokerage doesn't actually know what their own agents are doing. I was working with an agent in our Fort Worth office, if anybody's familiar with Texas, and she was about to sign on with us. And I got an alert from Corded that she had just closed on a $14 million property. And so I like instantly was able to pick up the phone, call her and congratulate her on that and tell her how excited that we were to have her and be able to market these properties with her. When she went to go give her notice to her brokerage, they did not even know that she had closed a $14 million like transaction. And I just found that astonishing because I'm like, how do you not know what your agents are doing? So um it is very, very helpful and it is a great like success story. To your question though, um, so when I see an agent that's maybe having their best year ever, that is a really good opportunity for me to have a talk track around continued growth and also working smarter, not harder. Um, our value proposition is based around how we can save agents time, but how we can also grow their business and make them more money. And so when I see an agent that's growing, I instantly know I can have the conversation with them about like, hey, you're doing incredibly well, but what are some of the things that you need taken off of your plate so that you can continue to grow? And so I'm able to lead that talk track and I can get information out of them on how we're going to be able to solve these problems to save them time, grow their business, and make them more money. On the flip side, when I see that an agent has had a decline in their business, especially when it's coupled with a recent move in the last 18 months, um, I try to be really delicate about that because nobody wants to have their flaws pointed out to them and nobody wants to be faced with the fact that their business isn't performing as they want it to be. And so what I do is I carefully say, I see you made a move in the last 12, 18 months. How's that been going for you? What were your expectations around that move? Has everything happened that you were promised? Like that's a really good opportunity to have a different kind of conversation around growth, around expectations, around support, while also not necessarily pointing out that you recognize that they're not performing as well as they should be.
Yeah, and some of the feedback that we've gotten as well is leaning into some of the efficiency metrics. So, since making the change a year ago, it looks like your closed list price ratio went down a bit, but your average days on market also went down. It looks like you're closing deals quicker, but they might be a bit mispriced, right? Or maybe they are now operating in a market that is 20% higher than what they're accustomed to, and they're moving up market, but they're not executing as efficiently as maybe they had previously been. So there could be an opportunity where, sure, you can handle quote unquote the bigger fish, but if you're able to do it at a rate in which you're, say, accustomed to, what would that mean? So I think those are, things that an agent, say, should know about themselves that they might not always have on the top of their mind. Chris, I know you were going to chime in. I didn't mean to cut you off there.
Yeah, no, not at all. A couple kind of points that I want to reiterate and highlight from what Ashley said, because I think there's a lot of really good and useful kind of pieces from there. One is just at a very basic level, her agents know that if she reaches out to them, like to please get back to her very quickly. I think just leveraging your own agents and their connections is like a thing that sounds a little bit obvious, but it's actually surprising to me sometimes with our customers kind of that they don't always take advantage of that. So, if you're a manager and you know all of your agents, it's very, very easy to have a conversation with them and assume that you're going to get a response quickly. I think even if you are a recruiter and you may not interact directly every day with your existing agents, I think it's really worth building a relationship with them such that you can actually lean on those connections and you can get some of those references from them and get them to respond to you pretty quickly. So just want to call that out. And then on the kind of agent who had a bad year, they just declined, over the past 12 to 18 months. Ashley's question of, hey, I see you switched brokerages 12 to 18 months ago. How has that been going for you? That is a question where you kind of already know the answer, as Ashley said. And I think that concept of asking questions where you already know the answer is a really good one when you're cold calling, because it can help kind of, you obviously will always want to be inquisitive and ask questions and do discovery, but it'll help move the conversation in a direction that you actually do kind of want it to go. So just wanted to call out a couple of those things. Actually, we got a question in the chat, which is obviously you want to lean on your connections as much as possible, but what happens when you are calling someone that you don't necessarily have a direct connection to? How do you approach that? Or you have no connection to them at all? How do you approach that?
Yeah. Similarly, I always lead my calls with kindness and curiosity. I also I also will sometimes say, which like this is you could take it one way or another, but like it's a very small world. There's always people that know others. And so I will say your name came up in passing the other day in our office. Somebody mentioned that you were incredibly professional. And when I hear that about agents, I always need to reach out. It's in passing. They're not going to verify that. Again, they're not going to verify that information. And so I constantly try to make it seem as if there is a connection somewhere. Now, if it's a cold call and it's literally just somebody that like I don't have any connection to, I can't even create a connection to. I call them and I'll be really forward about it, but also really kind and say, like, I see what you're doing. I see the work that you've been doing. You are exactly the kind of agent that we would love to get to know and support. Is there any opportunity for us to figure out if there could be a mutual fit somewhere? So I'm like pretty direct about it. And I find that when I am direct about it, but also like leading with kindness, it's pretty well received.
And just last question, just to make it hard on you. If
Yeah.
an agent like kind of, hears that and says they immediately just, alarm bells go off. They know it's a cold call. They get lots of cold calls like that all the time. And they
Yeah.
say, hey, I really appreciate it, but I get a lot of calls like this and I'm just not interested, in having a conversation. But, appreciate you giving me a call.
Yeah. That's a really good question. So I try to read the room, and if they're like aggressively no, then I'll probably pause and say like, I hear you. That's great. I apologize for interrupting your day. Is it okay if I give you a call back, a couple months down the road? If they are not aggressively like saying no, then I will say, okay, let me just ask you one question. Typically, when I speak to agents in your position, they'll say, "Oh, I'm happy where I am. I'm not really interested in making a move." But what really happens is that agents are in one of three buckets. They either are really happy where they are and they genuinely do not want to make a move, or they are, kind of happy, kind of not. They just don't want to deal with like the hassle of doing discovery. Or they're actually unhappy where they are and they just don't have the time to figure out what to do next. Do you fit into one of those buckets? And if so, which one? And so I find that that's like a pretty thought-provoking question. And based on the answer I get out of that, then I know exactly which direction to pursue. If they are genuinely happy where they are, then that's amazing. Like I'm not necessarily trying to cold sell them on that call. I'm gonna probably add them to an informational flow. I'm gonna keep in touch with them. I might ask them to grab coffee just for like networking purposes. And I'm definitely gonna invite them to our like cross brokerage events that we hold. If they fall into the middle bucket of like I'm fine, but I'm curious. I just don't have the time to do the work. Then that's where I'm really going to dig in and say, let's grab coffee. I'd love to just, like make this easy for you. And if they're unhappy, I'm going to like hard pursue that for sure.
Yeah, and one thing that I've found in my career to be very helpful, at least in breaking down the ice, is to actually lead with value as well. So, hey, Amy, I saw you just got a listing on 123 Main Street. I'm with Briggs Freeman, and I have 5 agents who've represented 8 different buyers in Fort Worth at the exact same price point. I would love to connect you with them. And immediately they, as an agent, go to where their next commission is going to be paid from, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
wow, this person who is not a part of my group is immediately giving me value and allowing for me to get paid, hopefully sooner rather than later. If you're
Hmm.
again able to do that from a timing standpoint, the second they secure that listing or prior to any of their supervisors even helping them in that regard, it goes a really, really long way in either a subsequent conversation or even an elongated conversation where they could even be curious or intrigued as to what you provide for your own folks if that's what you're doing for someone on the outside.
Yeah. I love that.
And
Um, I see a question. Are y'all cool if we go to a question really quick? Kara said, "What about someone that's not happy but and acts like they want to come but is scared to make a move?" I think that that's a really good question that we should chat about. The biggest hurdle outside of like that initial cold calling is change management. Actually, like getting somebody once they commit to make a move and move their business is really tricky and it's really scary for agents. And so what I do is I immediately tell these agents like, "Hey, I know you're probably feeling nervous. I know you're probably scared about this, but I want you to know that we are experts at change management. We do this all the time. We were able to move so and so who does $100 million in business, or who did $100 million last year. And we were able to move that, like execute that flawlessly. We are absolutely going to be able to help you ahead of time. I'm going to give you a checklist of everything that's going to happen. I'm going to give you a timeline of everything that's going to happen, but we have a team in place that's going to hold your hand through this entire process, and we will make this really, really easy for you." You make things scary by address or less scary by addressing them and by giving them the steps, and so it generally makes things a lot easier along the way.
yeah, absolutely. And a question that I had, right? We have a number of folks who, over time in using courted, have been attempting to say court, no pun intended, boomerang agents, or agents that used to be a part of the firm that you're hoping to now bring back. How does the talk
Mhm.
track change a bit if you know that person, or maybe you don't know that person and that agent was a part of, say, Briggs prior to your arrival? How does that change any sort of tactic or mechanic in the cold call?
Yeah. So in the case of boomerang agents, I will not call that agent unless I have a firm yes from the leadership at our brokerage and also a few key agents. Because ultimately, there are some agents that leave that you maybe don't want back. On the ones that we do want back, when I call them, well, first off, I think it's really important. This is a really key piece of the puzzle. When they leave your brokerage in the first place, you have to let them leave with kindness. You cannot be like you cannot be spiteful to them on the way out and then expect them to ever pick up the phone when you call again. And so that's something that we actually had to change in our business over the last 4 years, because initially it was like a very personal thing when agents would leave, and we had to realize that that wasn't the case and we needed to make changes. So when an agent goes out the door, we're very kind to them. We are one of the only brokerages in town that does not like keep their transactions from them or take massive percentages from them. So yes, somebody said in the chat, you love them on the way out. And that's exactly right. You love them and you treat them well on the way out, so that when you call them to have them come back, they have good, warm feelings about you because you were kind to them and helpful to them when they left. And so when I do call these agents that left us, the number one thing I want to know, first of all, is how are they doing? I have a genuine interest in how their business has been going, how they've been performing since they left us. And I also am I'm like a pretty upfront person. And I tell them, hey, I'm calling you because we miss you. You are a beloved member of our brokerage and we would love to have you back. Now, I also have probably been keeping an eye on what's been going on with their business. Are they going up? Are they going down? And then I'm going to like gear my conversation in whichever direction makes the most sense based on how their business has been going. Obviously, it's an easier conversation if their business has dropped off and hasn't performed in the way that they hoped.
Yeah, and those are conversations that, not that you know the outcome to before they already begin.
Right.
You certainly are asking questions that you know the answer to. Just to the last instance, right? In terms of starting the cold call, oftentimes people struggle when the objection that they receive is, well, we're in a down market. Interest rates are high. There's a lot of competition. Splits are all across the board. It's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
lawsuits, right? Things that, in essence, an agent cannot control for the most part. So when you start a cold call and you know that, for in fact, that Fort Worth is in a down market, for example, how do you get ahead of that objection before an agent is going to lean into something that, say, they can't control? Because we find that that's very
Yeah.
difficult, you know?
Yeah. So the first thing I'm going to know is like the stats of how my own agents are performing, even if we're in a down market. And I'll give you like a piece of information that I've been using currently. So I want to say like average commission rate in the DFW market right now is somewhere like around 2.5%. At Briggs Freeman, our average commission rate is hovering right at 3%, which is well above the average. So even though it is a down market, our agents are able to garner more money in their pockets because they are able to command a higher percentage on all of their transactions. And so that's a really important bit of information to know and to share out. And so I think knowing all of the ways that your brokerage is outperforming a down market and being able to like give these tips to agents that you're calling is really, really important.
Yeah, it's almost like having a battle card for
Yeah,
every type of decision that you can make within
truly.
a conversation. And the more prepared you can be, the more you can replicate that at scale and move expeditiously. Chris, I'm not sure if I had left anything out in regards to, say, starting the cold call, but if I didn't, keep me honest. I would love to jump into like the pivot points in the conversation. Did I miss anything out? I don't believe we did.
I think you're good.
And again, encourage everyone, please write into the chat any questions, comments, feel free. So then onto navigating different responses, objections, being personalized in real time. First question I
Yeah.
have is, what are some of the most common objections that you see, and how do you handle them?
Yeah. Number one most common objection that I see is no thanks. I'm happy where I am. I'm sure that's probably one of your common objections as well. And again, when I hear that objection, the number one thing I say is that's so great. I'm so glad that you're happy where you are. I obviously wouldn't probably, you know, be reaching out to you if I thought that this wasn't going to be a good fit for you. And then again, I ask the question, like, are you genuinely happy where you are, or are you interested in maybe knowing more? You just don't really have the time, or are you actually unhappy and you need more information? So I always ask that. The other thing that I say when I get the objection of I'm happy where I am is that's amazing. I don't even know that we're a mutual fit for each other yet. Like I'm not trying to sell you. I would love to get to know you personally. And then obviously the number one goal from a cold call is to get the meeting. So I'm trying to get to that point as quickly as possible. So when I get past that I'm happy where I am objection, I'm going to say I'd love to get to know you. I'd love to share a little bit about myself and how we support agents differently. Would you be open to grabbing coffee together? And so I try to just get through that quickly. Another really common objection I get is that it's pretty well known in the market that we're not the least expensive brokerage to be at. Sotheby's is not cheap. And so like people will boldly say, like, I cannot afford you guys, or I'm not willing to pay your fees. And so I instantly ask, what do you know about our fees? Like, what do you think that we're charging people? And find out that they actually don't really have accurate information. And I can easily be like, okay, well, I can see that you've maybe done a little research, but I'd actually like to share with you and show you what that looks like. And I also talk about our process. I'm like, listen, if we're a mutual fit for each other, we'd love to find a way to make this work, but that starts by doing a financial analysis, and we'll do a little bit of a comparison, and I'll put it up side by side and we can see if this makes sense. So those are the two most common. Jason, I'm sure you get some different ones.
Yeah, we get some fun ones. What I like to do is always benchmark their emotion. So if someone says, I'm happy where I am, I'm thrilled to hear that. It seems like you're crushing it. You've done $5 million this year. If you don't mind me asking, right? Like, what would have made your response be, I'm ecstatic and I'm never leaving? Whatever those two or three things are, that's the difference between I'm happy and I'm never leaving. If you're able to solve for those or at least speak on those, I think it allows for their guard to go down very, very quickly.
Hmm.
And when it comes to, on the financial side, it's having a prepared opportunity to chat about growth, whether it be that they're moving up
Yeah.
market or seeing that every agent who looks like them is doing 30% more on the transaction side, or maybe we have a ton of leads and
Yeah.
there's too much quote unquote turkey on the table for us to eat, right? So despite the fact that you might be giving a bit up in the split or on a commission rate, 3% of say 100 is much, much larger than maybe what the subsequent opportunity could look like. And being able to
Yeah.
articulate that in a way that's of a very simple, very non-jargony capacity, I think resonates very well with an individual.
Hmm. Definitely. Because of Corded, we're able to track every agent that's joined us over the last 24 months. And so the data that we're able to have while we watch these agents' business has been really incredible. And what we see from the data on Corded is that agents that have joined our brokerage over the last 24 months have grown their business anywhere between 30 and like 120%. Obviously, you're not going to say 120 because that feels unbelievable. But what I always do is say, the agents that join us typically grow their business about 40% within their first 2 years here. I'd love to actually show you a real life example of agents that have joined us who had business similar to yours, and show you what they're able to do now because of the tools, the technology, and the support we're able to offer them. That usually helps overcome the objection as well.
Yeah, and in rare instances, but if you're going after an agent, you can see on Corded all the way towards the bottom, it's agents they've worked with the most. And in rare
Hmm.
instances, it's actually someone who just joined your brokerage, right? It's like, oh, well, listen, I don't want to take up all your time, but you happen to know Steve, Steve Michaels, right? Yeah, yeah, of course I know Steve. Well, since joining us, this is what he did. And it's an interesting nugget to leave
Yeah.
behind for them. And in terms of creating urgency, that's the big piece. You're creating urgency to encourage them to take a meeting. You do a fantastic job of creating urgency without any pressure, right? I always joke, I'm from New York. I'm never going to back anyone to a corner and make them do anything. So how do you create
Yeah.
urgency without that pressure piece?
Yeah. I, in general, am like a pretty casual person. So creating urgency is something that I've had to like train myself on and kind of force into myself. So when I'm on these cold calls and trying to get to like the next step, I am obviously talking about like, okay, I think that we can save you time. I know we can help you grow your business. And I try to keep it casual still though, and say like, even though I don't want this to be casual, I want this process to go and I want to recruit this agent. I always try to keep it like casual in that, let's grab coffee, let's get this on the calendar. The way that I create the urgency though is by actually forcing them to schedule the time with me while they're on the phone. Like I will not hang up the phone until we've both opened our calendars, we've picked a date and time, and I have sent the calendar invite so that it's set in stone. And that's kind of like how I create the urgency without seeming as if I'm like forcing them into something, if you will.
Yeah, definitely. And we're getting a couple of questions here. I see a question from Katie. Um, how do you navigate the conversation when they right off the bat want to know about splits, and ask
Yeah.
them questions about splits rather than say, building their relationship before getting into the details? How do you navigate that world?
Really good question. I say all of our splits are based on production. We have a public split schedule that I'm happy to share with you. However, we like are gonna need to meet before I share that information. Like I don't just send that out. And then obviously I'll say like based on certain circumstances, there may be like an incentive split. But the other thing is I want to make sure that they understand that it's not all about splits. It's also about like the support that we're able to drive as well as the growth that they're going to experience by joining us. Um, People want to know that it's natural for them to have questions about it, but I just kind of like glaze over it pretty quickly and say like all of our splits are based on production. We can chat about that further. When we chat about splits, though, I'm going to do a financial comparison for you so you can see exactly what that's going to look like and how it's going to impact you financially. But I don't ever go into the details of it on the phone. The only thing I will say is like, listen, you're not going to come join us and get a 70% split out of the gate. Like that's just not going to happen. That's not something that we offer. And I think that it's smart to do that because you're anchoring them low. And so whatever you get them above that is going to feel higher in their brain.
Yeah, and see a couple of great comments, coming into the chat here. When it comes to the cold call itself, now you're in the meat and potatoes of it, and just like with any other conversation where listening is the driver of your next
Hmm.
action, right? The objective is the 80/20 rule. How do you get an agent talking 80% of the time? Are there maybe discovery questions that you ask or signals that you listen for, maybe change of tone or questions coming from them? How do you navigate that to have that perfect split of they're talking most of the time and we're kind of guiding the conversation?
Yeah. I ask very open-ended questions. I obviously like never try to ask yes and no questions. But the other thing too is that like I structured the way that I go about this probably a little bit differently. My point for the cold call is to get a meeting, not necessarily to do the bulk of my discovery about this agent on the cold call. So yes, I'm asking open-ended questions. I want to know what's important to them, but my primary driver and objective is to get this meeting scheduled, to get them to take a meeting with me. And so with those open-ended questions, I'm listening, I'm understanding what they're saying and probably asking more questions on top of that as well, but really gearing towards telling them how this is going to go. Like, hey, you've agreed to take a meeting with me. My process is a little different. I want you to learn everything you can learn about us. I want to learn everything I can learn about you so that we can decide if we're a mutual fit for each other. And the way that process goes is that, hey, John, I've just called you. We've agreed to a meeting. The next step is that we're going to sit together. We're going to learn about each other. And then the final step is that once we decide that this is a good fit for both of us, then we're going to talk finances and we're going to talk numbers. And I'm going to put a financial comparison on the screen for you and make an offer for you to join us. I also do indicate that like we might be making an offer to them that will include like a marketing incentive because then it also like encourages them to keep talking to you because they want to know what that's going to look like.
Yeah, and what I always do is, especially in the middle of a conversation, you're having a good conversation, I try to sprinkle in either an analogy or something that's a
Hmm.
commonality, right? So if I notice that someone went to, say, the University of Michigan, right? Maybe I'll reference the football team or Zingerman's, which is the deli up there, right? As an example as to how people operate as they're a part of, say, Corded or our family, and immediately they'll pick up that I've done some homework. And by referencing
Yeah.
familiar places or experiences, it allows for them to open up on some of maybe the more hard-hitting or direct questions, knowing that there's a commonality, whether it be college or arts or interests or
Right.
sports. And despite that, allowing the conversation maybe go 5 or 7 minutes longer than you'd like, you're able to garner a lot more
Yeah.
intrigue and detail from them just by finding some commonality.
Yeah, definitely. I see a question in the chat and it's from Francis. Do you find that most agents are open to provide you enough information to do a good comparison? The answer to that for me is yes. I think what's happened is that Compass came to town and they really changed the game on how agents have conversations and what their expectations are around their splits, what they're getting offered, what the process is for joining a new brokerage. And while I don't love all of that, I do think that it's made agents more aware that they have to share their financials in order to get the best package. And I tell every agent I'm having a conversation with, like, I want to get you the highest split. I want to get you the highest marketing budget. I want to be able to offer you the maximum amount of incentives that I can offer you. And I also want an accurate financial comparison. And I can't do that if you don't share the information with me. The other thing too is that like we verify splits, so we have to have a production report from the last 12 to 24 months from an agent, and I let them know that up front. And if that's not something that they're willing to share with us, then that's a red flag to me, and it's probably not somebody that I need to continue having a conversation with anyways. But I do find that like agents are real willing to share. The other side of that too is that I tell them we offer a lot of tools and we provide a lot of things to you that are probably going to end up saving you money. So I need to know what you're paying for out of pocket so that I can show you what the comparable tool is and I can show you where we're going to actually save you money. So
Yeah,
the answer is yes. Short.
yeah, and there's a couple of questions, a couple of great ideas. I see someone writing in that they use ChatGPT to compare the splits real quick. And a little bit more on the financial comparison. Is there anything specific that you look at?
Yeah, a lot of things. So luckily for me, I have like a wonderful EVP of finance who has built out some really great comparison tools for me. But what I look for specifically is a lot deeper than just split. So I'm going to compare, split. I'm going to compare monthly fees. I'm going to compare a resource fee or maybe like a franchise fee. I'm going to be able to compare whether someone's on a cap model versus like our model. But even deeper than that, I'm going to know like what is an agent paying for marketing? Maybe they hire somebody from the outside to run their social media. What are they paying for tools and technology? Like I know that a lot of agents pay for follow-up boss. With us, they don't have to do that because we provide their CRM for them. There's a lot of things that agents end up paying for out of pocket that they don't need to because we provide that as a service. So like I have a list of things that I go through and just I tell them, hey, we're going to talk finances. This might be a little uncomfortable, but I want to know what you're paying for everything. And then I'll go down a list of these things. So yeah.
Makes sense. We have a couple questions around kind of specifically competing with 100% split companies, and how do you navigate that conversation? Obviously, the financial comparison is a big piece of that. I wanted to share, and Ashley, I want to turn this question directly around on you as well, but I want to share some research that kind of we recently did around why agents switch brokerages. We basically kind of, commissioned some research that interviewed agents who had recently switched and talked about kind of why they switched. And through that research kind of uncovered that there were kind of two different categories of loyalty. So this is obviously why agents stay at the brokerage that they're at, but it's informative around kind of why they switch as well. There's practical loyalty and there's emotional loyalty. So practical loyalty are things like having a tech stack that, saves them time, having a fair split, having a transparent split, having systems in place, having, just a clear path to getting from A to B kind of production wise or getting support, whatever it is. That's kind of practical loyalty. And then emotional loyalty are things like, does it feel like I'm part of a work family? Does it feel like I'm part of a greater mission? Do I feel seen? Does my manager know me and talk to me and congratulate me? Am I receiving kind of the emotional support that I need and not just the practical support? So I think all companies can succeed on both kind of axes of loyalty. And all companies truly, I think, have a little bit of both. I think certain kind of categories of loyalty will come easier to certain companies versus others. So often you will see with 100% split companies, it's a lot of practical loyalty. And sometimes it can be a little bit more difficult or a little bit more of a struggle to get agents to actually feel the emotional loyalty that probably comes easier to agents who are not at 100% split companies, where the emotional loyalty is maybe all they feel and they don't feel like they have enough practical loyalty, the tools that they need, things that save them time, et cetera. So I think when you're talking to an agent who's at an 100% split company, I think leaning into, understanding like what kind of got them there in the first place. Is emotional loyalty something that's important to them at all? If the answer is no, then it's possible that they're not even really a good fit for your company, and that it would be really, really difficult to bring them over. So I would do like a little bit of discovery around that, framework and loyalty. But actually, curious about your experience with 100% split companies and those conversations.
Yeah. So I think what you're saying is incredibly accurate. Not everyone at 100% split company is going to be a good fit for our particular brokerage, but there are a lot of those agents that are going to be a good fit. And the number one thing that I do is like you need to get these agents to understand that while they may be making 100% of their split, they are spending an exponential amount of money on every single other aspect of their business. They are having to pay out of pocket for marketing. They're having to probably pay out of pocket for a transaction manager. They're having to pay out of pocket for like office space or whatever it is that they're utilizing. Every single thing is coming out of their bottom line. And it's probably a lot more money than they think. And it's a lot more money than if they were with a traditional full service brokerage. The other piece to this is that I also try to find out, like, are they tapped out? How are they able to continue to grow based on where they are? Because at the end of the day, if they're at 100% split brokerage, they're probably getting like close to zero support. And we've had a lot of success bringing over agents from those types of brokerages who feel like they're capped out on growth because they don't have the support that they need. And so one of the things that we're able to have the conversation around is transaction management, having a full service marketing team at your service, how we can actually grow your price point. Because again, if you're at a full, like 100% split, they're probably not really operating in a luxury market. And again, we want to work smarter, not harder. So a conversation around how do we grow your price point is also something that we're able to do. I think there's a lot of opportunity when you are talking to these 100% split agents once you figure out that they are the right fit for you, because there's a lot of different talk tracks that you can go down with them.
Absolutely. And just for the last 10 minutes in closing out the call or the webinar, let's talk about closing out the cold call, right? So this is my favorite topic. I could go on for years and years and years about this. But the first, question that I had, and I'll certainly chime in terms of confidently closing out a cold call. Do you have a checklist? Do you have an action plan? How do you step out of a cold call and say, you know what, that was great. I feel like everything is buttoned up and we're very clear as to what the next step is.
Yeah, so ideal outcome on a cold call is that you have a meeting set in stone. I operate under what I call a mutual action plan. So meaning like I'm going to do something, you're going to do something, and then we're both going to do something together. So number one goal is to get that meeting. If an agent agrees to get that meeting, then before I hang up the phone, I'm going to say, that's great. I'm so excited to meet with you. Let's open our calendars and let's pick a date. And so we will agree on a date and time, and I'll say, okay, incredible. I'm sure you don't want me to send this calendar invite to your professional email address. What email can I send this calendar invite to? So I'll obviously get their email address, and I'll send that calendar invite to them while I'm on the phone with them. And I wait for them to get it and accept it. And I'm like, okay, this is amazing. Like, so glad we have this scheduled. We've picked a date. I've sent you the invite. You have accepted it. We have a meeting place and like scheduled, and we're doing this, and that's great. So I try not to hang up the phone call without, having that date on the calendar, having the invite sent and accepted. Now, you're not going to have 100% win rate on these cold calls, and you're not going to get a meeting every time you take a call with somebody. So when I'm not successful in getting the meeting, the next thing that I want to do is I want the agent to be okay with me staying in touch with them. Obviously without driving them crazy or, like interfering in any way. So what I say to them is like, hey, this has been great. I've really enjoyed talking to you. I would love to stay in touch with you. Is that okay with you? Typically they're going to say, yeah, sure. And so at that point, once we've hung up the phone, I'm going to enroll them in one of many appropriate flows that I've got built out via HubSpot. And I'm going to have somebody, I'm going to be able to stay in constant contact with them. The same way that agents need to stay in front of their clients that maybe aren't transacting right now, but might be transacting in 6 months using their CRM, I'm going to do the same thing. And I'm going to send them relevant information on their business, on how our agents are growing. So I have a growth modeling story built out via flows on HubSpot. So it'll email them, at separate times over a course of 6 months. Now, the great thing about that is that I'm able to see when they open the emails, how long they read it, what they engage with. And if I notice that they're engaging with my emails on a regular cadence, I'm probably going to pick up the phone and call them again and be like, hey, what's up? Saw you've been reading my emails.
Yeah, and for me, it's very much about, to your point of mutual action plans. I call it a joint success
Mm-hmm.
plan, where you give them homework. Not a lot of homework, very little. And it's all in the spirit of tell someone you're going to do something, do it, and then remind them that you did it. So for me, just very,
Yeah.
specific example is if we got on the phone, Ashley, it's okay, Ashley, your email is ashley@gmail.com. I'm going to send over an invite for 7 o'clock tomorrow. Okay, you're still on the phone. Ashley, I just sent over that invite to Ashley@gmail for 7 o'clock. Can you just see that you got it? Conversation flows. Okay, just triple confirming. I haven't seen it yet on my calendar. It was Ashley at Gmail at 7 o'clock. That's when we're talking. And just subconsciously, it kind of imprints in their brain that they should show up. And I think part of that too is really where the art of recruiting, the
Yeah.
art of sales comes into play, where instead of suggesting, oh, well, I'm free all day tomorrow, even if that's the case, you have to suggest a very specific time. And if they suggest
Yes.
time, it actually might not hurt to say, you know what, I have another appointment at that time, and allow for them to give you another moment, maybe 15 minutes or 20 minutes, because that
Yeah.
appearance of being busy goes a very long way. And the busier you are, it's more special that you're spending time with them. What I also like to do is towards the end, once they've accepted the calendar invite, let's say you're meeting them for a cup of coffee, some little joke or something to say, listen, I'm usually an early bird. When I get there, I get my mocha with 2 shots of espresso. What do you like to drink, right? And if they give you that coffee order, great, I'll have that for you when you arrive. And they kind of feel tethered to the appointment,
Yeah.
that a little bit about just what they drink, which sounds so silly,
Yeah.
but it forces them to show up. And when they do show up and you have a cold brew waiting for them on a 95-degree day there in Dallas, you're already off to a hot start
Yeah.
relationship. So I think that
So
yeah, I think
not to
that's a
interrupt
big
you,
move.
but I totally do that too. I won't ask for their coffee order on the call, but I'll say like, hey, I'm going to text you in the morning for your coffee order so that I can have it waiting for you. And then I text them the morning of and I'm like, hi, like, what can I order you today? And so I do find that that's like actually really helpful in getting the meeting to be sticky.
Yeah, yeah, and even being honest about your timing too. If they could only meet at
Hmm.
11:30 and you have a call at 12, it's like, hey, I only have 15 minutes at this time. Let's start the conversation, but why don't we pick it up again at 2, right? And if they show up to
Yeah.
that second meeting, you got them. It's all the right intent, signals.
Yeah.
Right?
I love that.
So to me, it's a big timing game. It's a big, like, little pieces of homework, like accepting the calendar invite, giving a coffee order, or even
Hmm.
suggesting that you're going to be with your family tonight. You don't know what to watch, on Netflix. Like, oh, you got to watch Bridgerton, right? Those little pieces I find always allows
Yeah.
the conversation the next way, to at least be a little bit more natural. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I know we only have about 4 minutes left. So I want to just ask one more very quick question just to you, Ashley, and then I want to just,
Yeah.
let you share a little bit more about what you do and kind of, let people know how they can get in touch. But wanted to just ask you, like, what is the one mistake, the most common mistake that you see people make when it comes to cold calling that if you could just like get this into
Yeah.
people's brains to stop doing, what comes to mind?
There's two, but the number one mistake I see is like people not blocking out time for cold calling. I think cold calling, Jason, you're the only person I've ever heard say they love cold calling. Like love that for you, but I don't love it. I just do it and I've conditioned myself to do it well. Number one thing I see is like people don't actually put time on their calendar and block time to do it. If it's not there, it's out of sight, out of mind, especially when it's the thing that you don't like to do. The other piece of this too is that I try to put it earlier in the morning because I need to knock it out. What do they call eat the frog? Like do the thing you don't want to do and get it over with. You'll feel good about your day. You'll feel accomplished. But that is the number one thing. People aren't blocking time for it. It's not getting done. You have to pick up the phone. You have to call people. The more you do it, the better you get at it, and the worse it feels. Like you'll become a pro at it.
Yeah.
The other mistake I see made a lot is probably like an outlier, but I see people call, and this actually happened to somebody on my team, and it was like really embarrassing for this person, is that they picked up the phone to call an agent and they didn't realize that the agent had been with us before. So he didn't do his homework to know that this was an agent who had been with us before. And it was super offensive to the agent because this person on my team didn't know the agent's history. And so the other piece to it is like you need to do the minimal amount of like research before you pick up the phone and call somebody so that you you actually like sound like you care and like you know about them and that you're calling them for a reason other than just to knock a name off of the list.
Yep.
At the end of the day, people are people and they want to be known. And so like you got to know them. You got to pretend like you know
100%.
them, at least know something about them. But yeah, those are like the two biggest
Yeah.
mistakes I
No,
see.
I love that. Like not just knocking their name off a list. You actually like genuinely care about them. Jason,
Yeah.
yeah, one
My
1 second.
Yeah, my two big takeaways, two big pieces. The first is you have to flex that muscle and you have to learn how to do so in an elongated fashion. So the best way I learned how to do it was take a day, take a week, whatever your time blocking session is, you are not allowed to hang up the phone. Only the person on the other end of the phone is allowed to hang up, right? That's a really
Yeah.
interesting way to see how creative you are and what kind of information you can get. Once you've done that, I found that especially in the morning, during lunchtime, and at the end of the day, people typically have set calendar appointments. If you can make your cold calls between 10 and 12 and say 2 and 4, that's when you're catching people on the move and catching people where their calendar might not be as locked and loaded as it usually is. So my one piece of advice to flex the muscle and hopefully love cold calling as much as I do, don't hang up the phone. Let them hang up on you. And you'll quickly learn how good, bad, or somewhere in the middle you might be when it comes to your cold calling skills.
Yeah. Jason, to follow up on that though, like let them hang up on you. There are times I'm sure if you've called people that they actually legitimately have hung up on you.
Oh
It's
yeah.
not super often, but like they do hang up on you. I actually will call them back and be like, "Hey, Jason, I just was on the phone with you. We must have been disconnected." And
It's my
like
favorite move.
I have actually had people say, "Oh my God, I wish my team would call people back like that do this." And they're like, respect it. Now, sometimes they don't respect it and they're really like annoyed by it, but you do hit the person that is like, okay, I respect this. Like, thank you for the call back. Like, sorry for hanging up on you.
Well, and it gets you to the key point. You either want to get to a yes or to a no, and that confirms
Right.
yes or a no. I call that the double tap. And if there's someone who you really want to talk to, they don't answer the first time, call them right back immediately. If they see someone call twice, they're more likely to pick up, and it'll feel somewhat urgent. And then it's when you got to get creative. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, I love it.
Perfect. I want to share just one thing, and then Ashley, just want to let you kind of share a little bit more
Yeah.
about what you do, and I want to show everybody how they can get in touch with Ashley. You guys can all see, right?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, thank you guys so much for having me. This is something that I'm like so passionate about. I am VP of growth for Briggs Freeman Sotheby's and also for Peerage, which is our parent company. But I've also developed like a 6-week training program where I coach other brokerages on how to do this well, how to recruit agents, because it is a little bit different and it is a little bit more personal than maybe like your typical recruiting cycle. I've coached 14 Sotheby's across the United States, as well as all of the Sotheby's in Canada, and then a few of the Century 21 franchises as well. And it's something that I love. I'm super passionate about, and I've created a program that helps increase success and helps you recruit high performing agents and teams. So it's been, you know, a labor of love, and it's what I do day to day, and have really enjoyed it. But I
Awesome.
can't do it honestly without Corded. It's been the game changing tool for my business, and I like genuinely mean that.
Amazing. Well, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. As we said at the beginning, you are one of our earliest customers. And yeah, it's been such an honor to support you over the past couple of years. So really appreciate it. My dog who's in the room with me has stayed quiet this whole time and just been listening, of course.
Amazing.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks so much, Ashley. Thank you, everybody who joined.
Yeah.
We'll send this recording out to everybody and really appreciate it.
Thanks,
Yeah.
everyone.
Amazing. Thank you guys so much.